There is an orchard up high in the mountains. Here, a magical fruit grows. This is Jambu Air, and as you bite into its bright pink flesh, its juice bursts everywhere. As the sun rises over the mountains, the light highlights the thousands of fruit in the canopy above. We have many varieties of jambu planted all over the farm, and each one has a completely unique flavour and colour. Summertime means that the orchards are abundant with fruit, and the sheep and goats love this time of year, when sweet treats blanket the soil. Our grandparents planted this orchard years ago, and the trees have grown so tall since. Every year, as the branches come to life with flowers and then fruit, we think back to our grandparents planting these trees so many years ago, and we feel so grateful for this simple action. I think that to pick your own breakfast straight from the tree is one of the greatest privileges, and each morning as I wake and I wander these orchards finding different fruits and flavours, I feel so lucky to be given these joys from nature. Our grandparents left this world decades ago, but every day we feel so connected to them as we harvest this fruit that they planted. I think that this is what it means to plant a tree. It is to have hope for the future and sprinkle little gifts throughout the world. I don't know if our grandparents realised that 60 years on we would still be harvesting the rewards of their work, but these fruit feel like an eternal gift given to us that defies the laws of time. So I try to do the same, to live my life in ways that will continue to give even when I am gone. To make art, clear weeds, pass on skills, and plant trees for those to come. Inspired by the colours, textures, and flavours of the summer orchards, I am sewing a special skirt made from old handkerchiefs. The last time I sewed from handkerchiefs, I made a floral, flowy dress, but this time I'm changing it up a bit.
I'm in hanky heaven, I think. I've sorted them into different sections. I have my novelty, fun handkerchiefs from countries all over the world. Then I've got like my nice like florals and pastel hankies. And then these are like my men's handkerchiefs, which are a bit more like masculine. They're really like checkered and mostly blue and red, and I think that's what I'm going to make a skirt out of today because I think it's a fun juxtaposition.
I think that the men's hankies in all different checkers and plaids will be really fun to create from. I think I'll make a long gathered skirt that uses lots of handkerchiefs and flows beautifully. This part of the process is always so much fun, collecting all these secondhand materials and then planning what you'll create from them. I have so many ideas sometimes that it's hard to narrow them down and I just can't decide what to make. Vintage handkerchiefs were made from a very finely woven cotton. This makes the fabric super soft and its flow is unlike anything else. I think that they are my favourite recycled material to sew with because no hanky is the same, and every time I find one in an op shop I squeal with joy. I've been collecting them for years, and normally the secondhand shops will give them to me for free or very cheap because honestly, not many people are interested in secondhand handkerchiefs. It's been so fun sewing in the new studio space, and I feel so much inspiration every time I look out the new windows we built. I think back to just a few months ago when this roof was leaking and there was always a big puddle on this table, and I feel so much relief.
I'm so excited. I think I've really finalized the skirt's gradient now. It's going to start on blue at the top because I've got a few really cute feature handkerchiefs that I think really suit being like right at the top and being obvious. And then I really like it going down eventually into red. So whenever I sew something from handkerchiefs, I have one rule for myself, and that is to not cut any or many handkerchiefs. Or if you do cut them, make sure they're not the really beautiful ones, because I mean, some people would argue that they're just old things that people blew their noses into, but I think they're the most beautiful, amazing piece of fabric ever. Like, you should feel it. It's handkerchief cotton is a special weave, I think, so it's like really fine weave, and so that's why they are just so beautiful, like they're full of them. So I'm not going to cut any of these except for one, and that's this one, which is a more modern handkerchief, so I think it's not so much of a problem to cut it. And I'm just going to cut the sides off it so that it still looks like it hasn't been cut for the rest of the skirt. And then the sides I'm going to use for a waistband. but the rest of the handkerchiefs in the skirt will not be cut. So this little bit of remaining handkerchief is going to be the waistband, but I'm going to fuse it with a bit of iron-on interfacing, so then that makes it really hard so that it kind of sits in place more than the other fabric because it's all very lightweight. But on the back, I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to have it so that it gathers, so that it pulls in really tight on the waist. So I'm excited.
My ethos of sewing with zero waste is very important to me. These handkerchiefs are already fabrics that would otherwise be thrown out, so making something out of them that will continue to be loved feels so meaningful. And to make sure that there is absolutely no waste, not even a centimetre. Every single piece of fabric is used. 92 million tons of textile waste is produced each year, and a lot of this waste is created in the production of clothes. What's worse is that 85% of all textiles go to the dump each year. This waste is unimaginable, and it's hard to realise that we're all responsible. Looking outside, I think to the fruit tree orchards and how each tree continually gives to the world. I think of my actions and how planting a tree can grow fruit for hundreds of years to come, and then I think about my consumption and how buying new clothes can litter our landscape for hundreds of years to come. So over the last 5 years, I've only bought a handful of clothes new, and most of these have been essentials from responsible manufacturers. Almost everything I own is collected from op shops or secondhand. The top I'm wearing I got from an op shop last year, and the skirt is vintage from the 70s. Buying secondhand doesn't just help us avoid waste, but it also lets you save money, and each piece has such a story.
I feel like some sort of magician that's gonna like pull this out of my sleeve, but I am, because I have started this skirt, which feels like a magic trick. And look! If you sew 2 lines, both on a wider stitch length than usual and about 6 millimeters apart, then you grab the ends of the tail of the thread and then you pull. It makes a really nice even gather, and it's really satisfying to do.
Sewing the waistband on is always a bit stressful, but it's so exciting because you start to see the whole skirt come together. I'm just doing a thin waistband because I think it'll be a nice contrast with such a long skirt, and then it has an elastic back to make sure that it fits well.
This is going to be great. I'm excited, but I'm done for the day. I am tired.
Since finishing the studio renovations, it's been nice to finally enjoy the space. This kitchen was such a mess a few weeks ago, and now it feels like the most amazing cozy corner to cook a quick dinner in. The sun sets late in summer, so it doesn't get dark until after 8, so I love sewing intensely into the afternoons and then cooking a quick dinner when it gets late. Every detail of this studio was built with love, and I feel so proud as the build that we spent so long on is finally used in practice. I made a duck egg omelette with harissa potatoes and herbs from the garden, and then it's time for bed, so that I can get sewing again in the morning. The mornings have been so foggy at the moment, and this type of weather is my favourite, when the view becomes woven with thick mist and fog rising from the mountains. The sheep love it when it's time to move paddock, excited for the new fruit or grass in the next paddock. Sometimes they get an idea in their head of where they will go, and when they decide, you have no other choice but to take them there. The goats and sheep are funny. They never really get along. Even though they're so similar, they don't really respect each other. So whenever they're in the same paddock, they don't really hang out, they just kind of look at each other from the other side of the paddock. When our grandparents first planted these orchards, they didn't have animals. 15 years ago, we got the flock of sheep, and it changed everything. Our opa was constantly brush cutting and mowing. The overwhelming growth of the thick grass was the biggest threat to the fruit trees. It took him days to even clear a few paddocks, and by the time he had finished the job, the grass had already grown back again where he had started. When we got the flock of sheep, they loved eating all of the grass, and they also loved eating all of the fallen fruit from the fruit trees, which solved another problem. Fruit flies and fruit bats will be drawn to the orchards if there's too much fallen fruit, and then they'll begin to eat the fruit off the trees as well. We also noticed more work that they were doing. When they made droppings, they spread rich fertilizers around the soil. Then we got goats 5 years ago, and they added a whole different element to the farm. They prefer bushes and small trees, and they love to eat weeds, so they help so much in the regeneration of the landscape, eating invasive plants all day. The combination of both flocks is great, because the sheep prefer grass and fruit, so they focus on those jobs, but the goats prefer shrubs and also fruit, so they work on that. Together, so many manual jobs like brush cutting, mowing, weed clearing and fertilizing become less pressing, and we watch the animals do most of the work instead. Of course, we still need to do a lot, but now the work is so balanced. The trees, the animals and us all doing small parts, and in the combination, seeing the landscape thrive. Then there is Clover, our Maremma protected dog. His job is guarding the animals from predators like foxes, snakes and goannas, and he's saved the flock a few times now. A few months ago, a fox attacked the flock in the day and Clover chased it away before it could hurt any ducks or chickens. He's also a big goofball and he loves a cuddle more than anything else. Most of these hankies came from a lady that lives over the valley from us. She collected them from years and was selling a lot of them bulk. I was texting her about coming to pick them up, but this was about 2 years ago, and just before I was going to meet her, the massive flood came. This flood ruined every road and creek crossing for months, and still, years later, the road access is pretty dodgy. I texted her a few months after, seeing if she went okay in the floods and asking if she still happened to have the hankies. The water went through her house and she'd lost a lot of things. She had no idea where the hankies had gone, and we just talked about the devastation of the flood instead. Then, a few years later, she texted me again and said, "I found them!" I visited her under the cliff faces of the mountain, and she'd built out the inside of our old bus from the 70s. In some filing cabinets in the corner, she had hundreds of handkerchiefs. A lot of them came from her, and then a lot from op shops over the years. Some of them are even my brother's childhood hankies. It's so cool to see them combine all together, and see 20 old handkerchiefs join to become the cutest skirt. The hardest part of this skirt is the amount of gather. Each layer is gathered, so I need to sew super long threads and pinch the fabric together. I'm doing top stitching over each seam to neaten it up, and then it's time to sew up the side seam.
I am so happy with how this turned out. I can't believe just from a few old men's handkerchiefs, I've got the cutest skirt ever.
Thank you to our patrons for all of your support on our journey. We are so grateful.